Welcome to the introduction of TOGAF ADM, Phase A, Architecture Vision. In the previous phase, the preliminary phase, we've gone through the initialization activities in developing an enterprise architecture. In this phase, we will define an architecture vision. The main goal of Phase A is to set and confirm the expectations for an enterprise architecture project. You need to build consensus with the sponsoring organization and gain their approvals before you can continue to subsequent phases. Architecture vision provides a summary of the changes to the enterprise. The purpose of the architecture vision is to provide key stakeholders with a formally agreed outcome. You need to identify the key stakeholders and their concerns, and define the key requirements to be addressed. Effective communication to the stakeholders at the right time is a critical success factor for the enterprise architecture. Development of a communications plan for architecture allows for this communication to be carried out within a planned and managed process. It's valuable to understand the capabilities of a business, their level of maturity, and the gap between the current and the desired level of maturity. The statement of architecture work defines the scope and approach that will be used to complete an architecture development cycle. In the preliminary phase, the request for architecture work was issued from the sponsoring organization. In Phase A, you have to submit a statement of architecture work and secure the approval. Activities of Phase A. Activity 1. Develop architecture vision. Here you need to find out the key stakeholders and the architecture activities, as well as to state their concerns. Typically, stakeholders are people who are affected by the architecture, who have influence or power over it, or have an interest in its successful or unsuccessful conclusion. It might include senior executives, project organization roles, client organization roles, system developers, alliance partners, suppliers, IT operations, customers, etc. For each of the stakeholder, state his key concerns. Then, describe the kind and level of involvement for each stakeholder by specifying their classes. Some of the stakeholders may have the power either to block or advance. Some may be interested in knowing what's going on. Others may not be so interested. By stating the class, the team can easily see which stakeholders have the power and the authority to request changes or to stop any initiatives, and which stakeholders are likely to support the initiatives. Throughout the architecture development cycle, different deliverables will be produced. You need to state the deliverables that the stakeholders are interested in. Once you've identified the stakeholders, move on to describing the scenarios and issues to be addressed by the architecture activities, which involves describing the project background and listing the issues to be addressed. Project background is a description of the organization, its business, what's happening or what has happened that results in the development of architecture. The list of issues outlines the reasons why you need to develop an architecture. What are the current problems and what will be done to solve them? Once you've finished listing the problems to be addressed, move on to the discovery of drivers, goals, and high-level requirements. We recommend the use of the Archimate Enterprise Modeling Language for modeling all these. First, model the main stakeholders in the architecture engagement and their concerns as drivers. The stakeholders here are different from the stakeholders we said a moment ago. The stakeholders in this diagram are the people who will be affected by the business transformation, while the stakeholders we said earlier are the project stakeholders who are interested in different parts of the architecture development. Go back to this example. We've identified board and customer as stakeholders, represented by Archimate stakeholder shape. We've also identified a set of stakeholders' concerns, represented by drivers. Once the drivers are found, you can start assessing the drivers to find out the challenges that cause negative impacts on the drivers. In this example, with two assessments associated with the driver revenue. The two assessments show that the corporate's revenue is suffering from customers choosing competitors that provides digital customer experience and with a lower premium cost. Similarly, assess the driver costs. The assessments show that there is a high expenditure in personnel costs and maintenance costs. We know the challenges, so the next step is to set the goals to resolve those challenges. Goals such as improve customer retention, increase market share, reduce maintenance costs, and reduce personnel costs have a positive influence on these drivers. We've now identified the drivers and goals. The next step is to identify the requirements to realize those goals. In addition to the requirements shape, you can also model the capabilities, application services, and components involved in supporting those requirements. But of course, you won't go into too detail because the actual development of architecture is to be done in subsequent phases. Just keep everything simple here. Besides identifying requirements, you can also associate those principles you've identified before with the goal. This is to ensure the goals do align with the principles. Besides, you may also take this opportunity to add and revise the principles. Activity 2. Develop communications plan. Enterprise architectures contain large volumes of complex and interdependent information. In order to develop an enterprise architecture with success, effective communication of target information to the right stakeholders at the right time is very important. Development of communications plan is to ensure communications will be carried out within a planned and managed process. First off, identify the stakeholders who will take part in information sharing. They are typically people or groups of people who initiate communications. Be accountable, be informed, or be consulted. Then, list out and describe each of the communication type. Take the kick-off meeting as an example. State the purpose of communication. In this case is to introduce the project team and the project, as well as to reveal goals of iteration. State the stakeholders who will present the information and who will receive the information. Time and frequency. When will the communication take place? Documentation, which is the deliverables of communication. Communication need not to be a face-to-face conversation or meeting. It can be a report of status or progress. So in such case, documents like progress report, project log will be created. Once the types of communication are listed, state the responsibilities of the stakeholders. Are they responsible for producing the documents? Who are accountable? Who take the consultation role during the production of documents? Who will receive the documents or to be informed? Activity 3. Confirm business principles, goals, and drivers. In the preliminary phase, you've identified a set of business principles, goals, and drivers. Now in phase A, you have a deeper understanding about the architecture activities to be performed. You may now revise and confirm the business principles, goals, and drivers before continue. Activity 4. Develop capability assessment. TOGAF defines a capability as an ability that an organization, person, or system possesses. Here are some examples of business capabilities: customer care, financial management, and strategic management. In strategic planning, it is valuable to understand the capabilities within the enterprise, especially the business and IT capabilities, because you want to know if any capabilities need to be strengthened or added to implement the strategic and operational changes expected. Here are some examples of the business and IT capabilities. For business, you may have business management as a capability, which can be split further into capabilities like the management of strategic, fiscal, and accounting, risk and compliance, and performance. From this example, you can also see the difference between business functions and capabilities, which are often confused because something an organization delivers must be something it is capable to do. But as you can see, when considering capabilities, we focus on the expertise and capacity, instead of describing pieces of works done by an organization. Let's also take a look at some of the IT capabilities. We have applications and management, which involves application design and architecture, development, testing, quality assurance, and change management. Again, not any services or functions or development units, but the expertise it has in achieving certain strategic needs. This is the capability map viewpoints of Archimate. It allows business architects to create a structured overview of the capabilities of the enterprise. For each capability, evaluate the following. Business risk. Will there be any outstanding business issue created by the capability after the transformation? IT and infrastructure risk. If it's an IT capability, will there be any outstanding system or infrastructure issues caused by this capability after the transformation? Migration risk. Is there any risk during the transformation process? Maturity. Is the capability mature enough to satisfy the proposed target? Mitigation activities. What measures will be taken to mitigate the risk? Activity 5. Develop statement of architecture work. By the end of the preliminary phase, which is the previous phase, the sponsoring organization has issued the request for architecture work that states the needs of architecture development. And as a response, you now need to submit a statement of architecture work based on the principles set by the project sponsors and the findings in this phase. Reveal and agree the plans with the sponsors, and secure formal approval of the statement of architecture work under the appropriate governance procedures. Gain sponsors' sign-off to proceed. The statement of architecture work should contain the followings: a description of project request and background, a description of project and the scope of project, the stakeholders and the concerns, communications plan, acceptance criteria, which specifies the way to measure if the project is a success or not, a high-level project plan and schedule, and of course, the approval from sponsoring organization. Result of Phase A. The primary goal of Phase A is to build consensus with the sponsoring organization and gain their approvals. So once you've finished this phase, you should have obtained a formal approval from the sponsoring organization. You've secured the sign-off of the statement of architecture work. And in this phase, the following deliverables will be produced: architecture vision, communications plan, business principles, business goals, and business drivers, with necessary updates and a confirmed capability assessment, statement of architecture work. So we can now move on to the next three phases, Phase B, C, and D. In Phase B, C, and D, you will develop the target enterprise architecture by first recognizing the baseline and then creating the target and identifying the gap in between. Thanks for watching this video. See you in Phase B, C, and D.